Welcome to Down to Dunk. I'm your host, Andrew Schlecht. We're part of the Athletic Podcast Network. With me, as always, on Wednesdays is my good friend, Alex Spears. Alex, what's up?
What's up?
Just two guys wearing collared shirts here on a Wednesday afternoon doing a podcast.
Yeah. It's our work pod.
It's a little work pod. I just got back from Sam Presti's press conference to begin the season. Let's see if I can have like the official time. My recording that I did was 1 hour and 32 minutes and 54 seconds. So we're officially back. We got Sam Presti answering questions for 1.5 hours about the Thunder. It's great. It's great. Did you get to see any highlights or listen?
I listened to the whole thing, Andrew, on 1.75 speed.
Did you really?
I finished it in the last 45 minutes.
Did you seriously?
Yeah, I did.
That's great. That's great. See, that's exactly why I put it on the podcast feed, so you can listen to it at just breakneck speed.
That's what I did. I was racing home. I started off on 2 times speed, but I was like, this is a little too much. So I brought it back to 1.75, and I felt like I could do it.
What'd you think? Was there anything that stuck out to you specifically?
No, it was pretty low key overall. You know, I in the past have gotten frustrated at Presti's like refusal to admit this team is good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even going back to like the year they were 40 and 42,
Mm-hmm.
and he like wanted to make sure we all knew they still lost more games than they won. And I was like, oh my gosh, come on,
man.
But at this point, I actually understand it more now because like what is the possible upside from coming out and being super confident when every single podcast is saying you're going to run away with the 1 seed, when the odds say that you're the second best favorite to win the championship? Like, the only possible outcome of him saying anything like that is they either win the championship and everyone forgets that he said it, or they like flame out early and everyone brings up those comments again.
Everybody
And so
yeah,
I think it's interesting because you know that there's like these 2 separate worlds, and we're like such in the fan world, and like, yeah, I want to hear him say like, I would love to hear him say, yeah, I think this is the best team we've ever had. I'm super excited about this season. I think we can win it all. Like that would be really crazy because he's never really said something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, as fans, we also wouldn't want him to say that to the players. Like I would much rather him be saying what he's saying right now, where he's kind of hitting back those expectations, because especially with a young team, like maybe you can get away with that with an older veteran team where it's like, yeah, we know we're good. We're going to go try to do this. But with a young team, I do kind of get like that way of going about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where you're always pushing back the expectations because you don't want a young team to get like super up in their heads, thinking that they've already accomplished something. So has annoyed me in the past, but I do understand it.
Yeah. There's not really even a historical precedent in like the last 20 years for a team this young doing what this Thunder team is going to do. I think like the 15 Warriors were like the youngest team to ever win it. And they were like average age is like still like 2 years or 2 years plus, I think, older than what this team is, average age. So it's really never been done. And he talked about just what they have to do to overcome that. And it really does like go back to like leaning on like these internal values that they have and like to actually be able to overcome it, which I think is a kind of a crazy expectation. But I do think that, and a lot of it, I'm sure people think it's like a BS in some ways, but I really genuinely don't think it is. I think that they really do want to operate like internally with this like value system that exists within their ecosystem that helps them to get better. He talked about how there will be like, I can't remember if he said like brokenness and repair. I need to look back, but he just talked about how like things are not going to go well, like at times not go well, or things will change and then you'll have to repair and move forward. And like, that's how they can get better. And I kind of think of that as like not only like a Thunder team thing, but it's definitely like a life thing. And so it's just kind of cool to see him using that stuff with the team. Um, because I do think like all of that is like very valuable, not only like for the team to operate that way, but just for people to operate that way, just in life in general.
Well, and I think I totally understand why people can kind of like roll their eyes at some of the stuff Presti says, but the reality is that like any business that has been successful for this long of a period of time, they all do this stuff.
Yes.
They all
Oh,
have this like set of principles. It's just you don't usually get someone like explaining it all to you and
yeah.
telling you like some of the finer details. But like every successful business does this kind of stuff. Like
Yeah.
so, it's just unique that we're hearing it all.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it is even in like the world of the NBA. It's unique that a general manager would sit down with media for an hour and a half and answer questions and like be as open as he can with also while also like being really measured with his approach to all of it. Um, I thought, I'm always interested to just kind of soak up anything that he says, to be honest, just because he has to do what he's done at this level, like now twice, where like he had this like great team that, some of it that he caught lightning in a bottle in the draft like 3 years in a row, and then he put together like a really good team. But this obviously this time around just feels like such a result of the process that they have in place, and such a result of like just very careful planning. And so, like honestly, I just want to soak up anything that I can, from him in these, press conferences. And it felt like a long time sitting in the room, but at the same time, it's like, man, I could hear him answer more questions about all of this. To
Well,
be honest,
I mean, I think the quote for me that hit on that the most was he said, "I think there's a difference between picking players and selecting a team, and I
yeah,
like the way this team has been selected."
yeah,
And listen, I'm not saying that's a shot at the Rockets, okay? But it just reminds me of going back to the beginning of all this when we were talking about taking the best player available,
yeah,
which I think at that time made a lot of sense to us. And I'm not even saying that that doesn't work. I think it could absolutely work out for Houston.
yeah,
Always taking the player with the highest upside, always taking the players who fall in a draft. But this experience with this rebuild, I think, has at least shown me that there is another way to do it. Like that you can have an idea for what you want the team to look like first, and then start identifying players off of that. And you might pass up good players. You might pass up players who will have better careers in favor of players that you think will fit your system better. And
mm,
there's going to be misses no matter what. But I just liked that idea because I really do think that sums up this rebuild in terms of how they've approached it. Like they've been selecting a team this whole time.
yeah,
Whereas I think you can look at a team like Houston and say they've been picking players. Like they've been taking the best possible prospect that they could every single time. And that is not a shot at them because that could work. Like they have so many good young players.
yep,
Like it could just work out where okay, 3 or 4 of these guys rise to the top, they trade away the other guys, and all of a sudden you have a team that makes sense together. But it might take a little bit longer to get there because even now, like I feel like Houston's still trying to figure out like what is this all going to look like. Like you still don't totally know what Houston's identity going forward is going to be because you have all these super high ceiling players that, as we've talked about before, have these very specific deficiencies. And so, like, how do you organize them all together? Whereas with OKC, obviously, the biggest reason why this turned around so quickly was because they traded for Shea. But the
hmm,
other reason it turned around so quickly is because they did have this system in place. And even when they were terrible, we were still seeing flashes of stuff that isn't normal for a rebuilding team.
yeah,
That period, I forget which rebuilding season it was. I mean, there were only 2 of them, where they were really good defensively.
yeah.
Like they were hovering around top 10 for a lot of that season before falling off. That's not normal. Like that does not happen usually. And I think that kind of stuff is a really good sign. Similarly with like Orlando, I remember when they were really bad, you could look at the lineup combinations with the players who actually mattered, like Franz and Suggs and Wendell Carter Jr. at that time. And they were always positive, and they were
Yeah.
always like significantly positive, even as they were terrible. And I think those are the type of signs you look for of a team that's like being built with an idea in mind. I think for Orlando, it was like we're going to try to create just an insane defense and then build off of that. And for Oklahoma City, I do think it kind of starts with the offense. I mean, he's talking about passing a lot. We've talked about passing in the past, having some, players who can react and make decisions at all 5 positions like that. I do feel like that is the foundation of this team, even as they are also a great defensive team. But I feel like it all starts on that offensive end in terms of like the sharing aspect of it,
Yeah.
like the zero ego part of it all starts on offense.
Yeah, he talked a lot about style of play today, which I think is clearly a point of emphasis for them this season. Is that establishing a style of play that he talked about, excuse me, like the flow being both offensively and defensively, but I think it's just easier to talk about it on the offensive end in a lot of ways. But I think to me, they did a lot of work in the offseason to kind of reshape the roster. And then I think the biggest point of emphasis going into this season is just going to be style of play. And I think that he hit on that a lot about how, he's talked about like the less pattern, more rhythm stuff with them. He wants to kind of unlock. I think that's like the thing that will unlock this team is if they can play with more rhythm and flow on both ends. And I think that they're bringing in players that do that. There are just very few players on this roster that you question that could be part of that. And that's part of, like you said, like selecting players. Like they're selecting players that can fit into the flow of what they do. And I think that's been pretty obvious over the course of the last couple of years. But I think like we sit here and look at the roster today, and it's even like more obvious that that's the direction that they're going with all this, which is really cool. And then also like some of it's like they got lucky and they were able to select Chet. Like what if the Rockets got the number 2 pick in that draft? Like would the Rockets have taken Chet? And then like what did the Thunder do from there?
Yeah.
So like some of it is luck there. I do think like the J-Dub stuff is clearly just like such a feather in their cap though. Like to take him at 12, which felt like a reach on draft night, and to really like strategize to make sure that they get him. That to me was like one of the bigger ones and like one of their best draft selections like ever is getting J-Dub there at 12. I think, that one's going to go down in history. A little bit like Westbrook. Westbrook was one, and he was a higher draft pick, but he was somebody that it felt like they reached for. Whereas like Kevin just kind of fell into the lap, and I feel like Chet did in a certain way too. But I just think like that Dub pick was just unbelievable. Just kind of reflecting on what Sam had to say today.
No, I am interested to see like how these press conferences change as the team does continue on, because it feels inevitable. Like at some point you do have to like address the elephant in the room, which is like if this team does end up, let's say they make the Western Conference Finals, like at that part, like all this talk about like we're still waiting for the arrival, after they've been the number 1 seed, like that you have to throw that out the window at some point, and you have to acknowledge publicly that this is like an elite basketball team.
Yeah.
So I do think that is coming. This is probably the last press conference where he can get away with saying like we're hoping to make our arrival when they were a number 1 seed last year in a really difficult Western Conference. So I do think the press conferences will have to change somewhat. Like eventually you do have to acknowledge this stuff, but I get it. I understand it.
Yeah, I do too. Just like you said, there's no upside to coming to the table today and saying, hey, we're going to destroy everybody. Like we're going to dominate.
On the flip side, like I think it's totally fine if like players talk like that. Like I remember Lou Dort talking about the playoffs like 2 years ago.
Yeah, definitely.
And that, like that's awesome. That's cool. Like you would want the players on your team to talk more like that than be like, well, we'll see what happens. It's a very tough Western Conference.
The cement is not yet dry on what I think about next season.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, that's definitely like more, and I think a lot of those guys do try to think like this, and probably to a degree are like told like, hey, like let's talk about the upside of making declarations like this. But Lou, I mean, he had a lot of confidence, and it wasn't misplaced confidence, looking back at it, with what he had to say.
And that's why I do think those type of quotes are instructive for fans, because you can look back at it and kind of see through all the talk and be like, oh, they really were confident in themselves. Like they knew they had something cooking.
Yeah.
Even at that point when they were coming off, well, I mean, they had the second pick overall, so like they weren't great the previous season, but they like knew they had something.
Yeah.
And we just hadn't seen it yet.
Yeah, without a doubt. Other things that stuck out to me today. Um, he,
Hey,
he
what did he mean by social media is a sport, but scrolling is a lifestyle? I feel like what does that mean?
just a bar. It's just a banger of a.
But what does it mean? Which is he putting down? Is he putting down both?
I think he would. I think if he had his druthers, he would put them both down.
Oh, okay. Because I'll be honest, scrolling as a lifestyle made me feel better about like being on Twitter all the time. I was like, yeah, this is a lifestyle. Like not because like the idea of like not interacting, like not engaging with
Yeah.
the internet, which he brought up a lot of times. That is scrolling. Like
Yeah.
you're aware of it, but you're scrolling right past. And so I am thinking of that quote positively. Scrolling is a lifestyle. Don't engage. I see everything. I see everything. I take it all in. And then I just use this 1 hour a week to talk about it.
Yeah. I don't know. There was that, and like he had a Ben Franklin quote that I was kind of struggling with myself to connect it to what he was trying to say.
He must have just read like a Ben Franklin book or something. Because I mean, obviously we all know Ben Franklin, but he's rarely like on the tip of my tongue. I would say he must have just seen a documentary or read a book or something.
Yeah. You could just tell that he just really wanted to talk about Benjamin Franklin, which is cool. Like he did a lot of very cool things.
He did.
So yeah, the quote about social media was really good. So he did talk when talking about style of play. He did say that we're going to try to avoid your turn, my turn play, and he said that was going to be especially challenging at the beginning of the season. But I think that we did see a lot of that in the Mavericks series specifically, and I think that it's good to just like acknowledge that, that like, yeah, that is not how we want to play. We want to be a team that plays with more rhythm and like that has an established style of play. So, I thought that, it's good to hear that because I mean, how many times do we talk about that with like the Russ KD teams where it's like your turn, my turn? It was almost like a guarantee that whatever the podcast segment was about the Thunder during that era, it was always going to come up in some kind of way.
Yeah, for sure. And they were so talented that it like almost worked. I mean, we kind of saw that. I remember the first year of the Miami Heat with LeBron and Wade, where it was a lot of your turn, my turn. They were still amazing. They still made it to the finals, but then they lost to the Mavs. And as that team grew, it just became so much more of a basketball team.
Yeah.
With like Chris Bosh falling into his role, Dwayne Wade falling into his role, LeBron just becoming like an efficiency monster around the basket. So yeah, I mean, who knows what would have happened if KD had stayed and they'd gotten Al Horford. Like maybe that team would have eventually evolved, but it did kind of feel like their offense was just like it had reached a really high point, but it was hard to see how they were going to get to that next step without those guys changing significantly how they play, and mainly thinking about Russ. But yeah, this team just feels like so much better set up, and maybe they won't have the ceiling of those teams because Kevin Durant and Russ are legends. They're Hall of Famers. But I don't know. I think I'm really high on a lot of the players on this team. I'm like so high on Chet.
Yeah.
But I also think this could be a thing where this team, even with great players, could still be like more than the sum of its parts. Like the whole of this team could still get to even higher heights than those KD teams, just because everything just makes more sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we saw that last year. Like that happened like before our eyes. It felt like those KD Russ teams that they were put together well, because you don't reach the Western Conference Finals and NBA Finals and not have a team that's put together well. But like last season, no one really thought this was going to get there. I felt like the KD and Russ teams, like just by sheer talent, just like forced themselves. But this team, while I don't think that they're where they want to be as far as like style of play goes, I think that they started to scratch the surface of that last year.
Mm-hmm.
They started to really figure out who they were and had an identity, and they stuck to their defensive principles, and they had a way of playing offense that made sense, that really worked in the regular season, that I thought bogged down as we got closer to the end there for them. But yeah, I agree. And there's also just players that make sense within their roles, here that can be better than who they really are. I think like Aaron Wiggins is somebody that, like, I think Aaron Wiggins is a good player, but I think just the way that he works within this system is just like amplifies like who he could have ever been. Like if he just was like, I don't know, like on the Knicks or something. I just don't know if we think as highly of Aaron Wiggins. But I think like this Thunder squad is just like perfect for him.
Something else I thought was really interesting was his comments on the expansion
Mhm.
talks. So he didn't get into too many details in terms of like when or if he thought it was going to happen, but he said he imagines rules that have been in place since Bird and Magic were rookies wouldn't pass the smell test with Adam Silver's administration. And
Yeah.
to me, that felt like a first like public salvo to like kind of get his position out there about these rules need to change
Yeah.
because teams that have been put together very well, which includes the Oklahoma City Thunder, should not be penalized for this by having to unprotect really valuable players.
Yeah.
That's what that felt like to me. And
Yeah.
I think that's something that would be shared by a lot of teams. I mean, not as good as the Thunder, but the Rockets. Like, imagine the Rockets having all these young guys and having to unprotect a couple of those guys. Like, imagine having to unprotect, like, even Jabari Smith Jr. Like, that
Oh
would
my
be
gosh.
terrible. Like, but they in the way
Yeah,
it's
that
set
would
up,
be
they
crazy.
might have to just because they have so many young guys. So that felt to me like the start of the negotiation process. Where I mean, we remember when they were deciding what to do with the lottery odds, and OKC, if they weren't the only team that voted against it, they were one of the only teams that voted against it.
Yeah.
Like teams have a say in a lot of these rule changes, and so that felt to me like Presti starting the process of, maybe he'll be reaching out to other GMs to figure out that might be sympathetic. I would think a lot of them would be sympathetic. Like, why would you want to lose a good player?
Yeah. With the depth of the league being where it is, and Sam talked about this today too. Just like the depth is just better than it's ever been. And
Yeah.
so like almost everybody would be like, oh my gosh, like we're gonna have to unprotect like some valuable player, and like, or what are we gonna do? Give up a draft pick, or we're gonna have to let him go?
Right.
Yeah, I mean that happened to the Kings. Like they lost Gerald Wallace,
Yeah.
in that expansion draft, and the Kings they were a very deep team back in the day. And so you could see, I mean, the Thunder, you get to 8 players really fast if that was what the rule was. And there's other rules too, like depending on where your contract is and how many years you played and all of that. But anyways, yeah, to me, that was one of the more interesting things that he said. Just that, like, one, those rules have been around for that long. It's just kind of wild. But also that it's like, yeah, and these rules should change. Like this.
Yeah, because you
This
go
is our
back and look at the expansion draft when like the Bobcats came in, and just look at who was available. Just look
Yeah.
at who they drafted,
Yeah.
and then I mean, me and McKelly did it a few summers ago. Was that last summer?
Last
Where
summer.
we did an expansion draft. I bet if you did it this summer, it would look even crazier. Like the names that might be possible for other teams to grab, as the league just gets deeper and deeper. So imagine in like 2 years with 2 more good draft classes coming through in 25 and 26, and then having to do this.
Oh, Alex frozen? Am I frozen?
I can hear you. You're frozen.
Yeah, I
You're back now.
are we back?
I am. I look great. You look fuzzy. You're starting to come in clearer now, though.
Okay. All right. Well, keep going. You're talking about the Bobcats.
Oh, I was just saying that, like, if you did that exercise that me and McKelly did last summer, if you did it this summer, or if you did it after these next 2 draft classes, which are supposed to be really good, I mean, the depth in the league in 2 years is going to be so high. The names that will be available to those expansion teams will be real names. They won't be like some of the fringe NBA players that we saw back when the Bobcats were in this situation.
Yeah. Yeah, it will be like, I mean, if ESPN or Amazon or whoever isn't like broadcasting like something around this, it's like a huge missed opportunity,
Yeah.
because it's going to be a huge talking point when it happens. And I think we're still a ways away from it happening. I think like 28 is what people are saying. We could be in a new arena by the time that we're talking like expansion really happening.
Yeah.
So it should be kind of cool. The arena was a little bit today, but nothing super definitive there.
Yeah, nothing juicy there.
Yeah.
I did think his list of favorite players growing up was it was depressing because it was very close to my list, and I thought that he was like way older than me, and I was like, why is he talking about Randall Cunningham? He should be older. He should be talking about someone way older than that. So it just made me feel really old. And like Wade Boggs, I was just tweeting with Brandon Raybar. But when the Phillies had the All-Star game in 1996, I went to the hotel where all the players were, and all the players came out. Wade Boggs was the only one who stopped and signed for everyone.
Wow.
So I always have fond memories of him. And then obviously, like, Griffey's a legend. Everyone loves Griffey. And Barry Sanders. I mean, Barry Sanders is probably like the greatest highlight athlete of all time. Like, his highlight package is better than any other athlete. Shame that he played for a bad team when he went to the NFL, but like truly legendary athlete. So I liked his selections, but it also felt way too similar to what I might have said. I was hoping he would choose older players, like choose like Magic Johnson, and that would have made me feel a little younger.
Yeah, Sam's not that old. It is pretty crazy that he's accomplished so much and is really just, he still has a lot of like his career ahead of him, like whether he chooses to stay in the NBA or not. Like he just has a lot left in the tank there. He talked about Jay Will today. What was the quote? He said, "I think Jay Will is a special guy." And he said that he just helps teams win a little more than they should. So I thought that was kind of interesting. He talked a lot about how the West has made this team better and has like made them better faster. It's been like something that has accelerated their progress. It's just that they play in the Western Conference, which I thought was interesting. Because like you could argue too, and I know that he's more talking about like the actual internal progress of the team. But like if they played in the East last year, I mean, could they have won 60 games? It's like that's so insane to think, So like maybe like the outward progress maybe would look a little different to them, but I do agree that like getting to play like high level competition night in night out, if your team has the capacity to do it, it will make them better.
Yeah.
So,
the only thing I would have liked a question about what was the Bally Sports thing, just because that was news this week, and I just happened to listen to a Blazers podcast yesterday because the Blazers announced that everything's going to be over the air. It's incredible. It's going to be on YouTube TV, which is great for me and my friend who's a big Blazers fan. And similar to OKC, they were in a position where they still had 1 year remaining on their deal with out here. It's called Root Sports. And they decided to like eat it essentially and get it over the air quicker. And one of the things that Danny Meringue said on that podcast was the Blazers had actually been asking the NBA for the past decade if they could do something like this. And it was only recently that the NBA even was open to the idea. Like they wanted to do something like this maybe 10 years ago, and the NBA just wouldn't let them do it. And so it's just obviously it doesn't affect me because I live in Portland. I get to watch all the games on League Pass. It's great. But I do feel bad for fans in OKC. And I just feel like league wide, this issue hasn't been taken serious enough. I mean, the fact that the thing went on with the Nuggets and Altitude Sports for so many years, like no league should let that happen. Like David Stern would not have let that happen. I truly believe that. I know people talk about Stern a lot and like make him into this like, he would have done anything. But I truly believe he would have not let that happen.
Yeah.
Because having a marquee team like the Nuggets not be viewable to a large percentage of their fans is just stupid. It's terrible business.
Yeah.
And for a franchise that I feel like is on the front foot on a lot of issues, it just feels like this is one issue where they're just like behind the times. And maybe there's a legitimate reason why they have to stick out this final year with Bally, but they haven't addressed it. They haven't mentioned it. And meanwhile, the fans are seeing teams like Utah and Phoenix and Portland all go direct to their fans, and it's obviously awesome. Like it's the biggest like PR boost you could possibly get. It's so exciting for fans to know that you don't have to buy some extra crazy package or get some dumb app. You can just turn on your TV and watch your team like we used to. And so I would have liked to hear him address that. And even if they have a good reason, I would like to hear them acknowledge that like this is important. Like it is important for fans to be able to watch the team as easily as possible, because that going forward, I mean, we're in a similar position like the Nuggets were, where like now this is a contender. Like this isn't the tanking years where, okay, maybe it's not that big of a deal. Like this is a contender now. It should be easy to watch this team. And it's not just that Bally Sports is, you got to get a certain package. You have to pay them additional money to do like their streaming service. It's also that like they've been terrible. They've had games where the feed has just gone out.
Completely gone. Yeah.
Like it's not just that it's stupid expensive and hard to get. It's that it's bad too. So I was frustrated with that announcement because we know that it's possible. We know other teams are doing this, and maybe they're just going to be a year behind that cycle for whatever reason. And we know the contract's coming to an end. They only have 1 year left, so we know that something's going to happen. So the decision not to do something now versus waiting another year, I would just like to hear some explanation for that.
Yeah, and that might be a better question for Dan Mahoney too, who's like in charge of a lot of that stuff with the Thunder.
Who's Dan Mahoney?
He does like all the broadcast stuff for them. So
new name for me, Andrew.
Yeah. I echo everything you said. It's annoying. Like it's just it's bad. It's bad. Like it's just the way I've always phrased it is it sucks that you can't just casually turn on a Thunder game.
Yeah.
Like if your aunt or uncle like kind of like would like to get into the Thunder, but they're not willing to spend any money to do so, like they can't really just be like, yeah, I'm just gonna flip it on, here on a random Thursday night, or on a random Tuesday night because I don't have anything else going on. There's nothing on TV. I would like to watch the Thunder, and see what the hubbub is about.
It's a system that kind of forces you to be a diehard like right out of the gate.
Yeah. Yeah,
you have to already love this team and be into it.
And what's bad about it is that it still is not good for the diehard as well.
Yeah, exactly.
It's bad for the diehard, and it's bad for like the people that would just like to get to know this team. Because the thing about this team, like this, and everybody that's in the show knows this, but the people that haven't watched them play yet, is like, one, they play a really fun style of basketball, and then two, it's like a group of guys that you really want to get to know. Once you start watching them and you see the stuff on social media and you see them like with Nick Gallo after the game, it's like, I want to know these guys. Like I want to follow them. And if you're unable to watch the games casually, it's hard. So
yeah, I think this is a good team for like boomer dads, that like have fallen out with the NBA because of these ideas they have about what the game looks like and how it's played. Like this is a team that is, it's like the essence of basketball. It's basketball is jazz. This is one of those teams, like that you want to watch because it is aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah,
and so
they play the right way. They share the ball. They play defense. They pass.
That's right. That's right. All that stuff.
Yeah. They don't just jack threes only. You know, they know how to use the mid range. You know, they got all of it.
That is true. Should we should probably talk about Kawhi. I don't think we've talked about that on.
I know.
It's already. I see it right here. I'm just realizing the title of this.
It's in there.
Kawhi.
Let's take a quick break, and we come back. We'll talk about Kawhi Leonard's knee and the potential impact on the Thunder. We'll be right back. And we're back after that quick break. Alex Shamsharania yesterday tweeted about Kawhi Leonard's knee, and he said, Clippers star Kawhi Leonard underwent a procedure on his knee in the offseason. Sources tell me and Law Murray. Shout out to Law Murray. The franchise said today Leonard will be limited to strengthening his knee to start training camp, but team officials are optimistic about his progress.
Yeah, I mean, from a Clippers fan perspective, like the thing that I feel weirdest about is it's not clear to me that the Clippers knew this procedure was happening based on the way they were talking about this in the summer. And so I would love to know what the actual timeline of this was in terms of when this was decided and you know when everything happened and all that. If there's something that feels weird about it.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, the thing that doesn't feel weird is that, you know, this is what Kawhi's career has been like for the last several seasons, where these types of announcements have become way too routine, and it's awful because it feels like the alpha level Kawhi that we used to see like towards the end of his Spurs career and then that year in Toronto. Like that player was so terrifying. Like the way you just felt every time he got the ball and he came down, like he was going to get a shot and it was going to be a great shot and he was going to make it. And he had some games where he truly felt unstoppable. And the fact that we only get to see flashes of that player now for like a game or two at a time, huge bummer. For the Thunder, though, like this is why you make these kind of bets. And it's why you make these kind of bets with teams like the Clippers. And it's why you double down on those bets like he did when he got the swap in 27, because these are the types of teams that fall apart when they have aging stars who have an injury history. Like eventually you might just get lucky. And maybe the Thunder have gotten lucky this season with Paul George leaving, Kawhi coming into the season injured, you know, or at least not full strength, and trying to figure out what's going to happen with the rest of this team. I forget who it was on Twitter, but they threw out a fake trade between the Lakers and the Clippers getting James Harden to the Lakers.
Oh, really?
Which when I saw it, I was like, man, that sounds like something that would actually happen.
It's like D'Lo and like what else?
and it was D'Lo, Rui, and then 2 future firsts. So they're like 29 and 31. And I forget the protections they put on them. But like, man, I can kind of see it. Like if Kawhi's just like not playing and Harden gets pissed again, and honestly, Harden would be great on the Lakers. At least he would be very helpful offensively.
Yeah,
man, it doesn't sound that crazy. And if something like that happened, then the doors are wide open for like a top 5 pick. So yeah, I mean, terrible news for Kawhi, but this is the reason why you make these bets, because eventually you might get lucky one season, and the Thunder might get lucky this season.
Yeah. It would be incredible. And it was not even necessarily just like the number 1 overall pick. You know, like that would be the ultimate if somehow they could get Cooper Flagg, who.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely think they would draft a player, but just to have that asset as a team coming off whatever season they're about to have, we just haven't seen that. Those situations are extremely rare. I mean, I guess the Detroit pick.
I was about to bring
took Darko.
I was about to bring up Detroit. You just hope that they wouldn't take whoever the Darko of this draft is. You know,
who is the Darko of this draft?
Darko of the 2025 draft. We don't know yet. Is it Nolan Traore? You know, maybe he'd be probably a little tempting for the Thunder to take. Yeah, I mean it would be insane. And if even if they just get a lottery pick, like any lottery pick again.
Yeah.
You know, to have picked to be as good as you are and picked in the lottery for the last 3 seasons,
Yeah.
where you get Kaysen, in the lottery, you get our pal Airbud in the lottery, and then, if they, I think they're going to get another lottery pick. It would be my prediction. Even before all this Kawhi news, I thought they were going to get another lottery pick.
And the other thing is, like, now that they have that swap in 27, like, is this really going to get better? Like, do we feel like this situation is going to get better? I mean, they
I don't know how.
extended Kawhi, they
I know.
extended Harden,
I
and
know.
it's not like this has been a very good drafting team. They don't have a bunch of young players in the pipeline. They've actually been really bad at drafting over the last several years. They're young players. It's like, well, Terrence Mann is always fake young, so we'll continue
Been fake
considering
young
him
for
young,
like 3 years now. Yep.
even though he's about to turn 28. But it's like Bones Highland and Kevin Porter Jr. Like, those are their young guys. And then who did, they probably drafted some guys in this recent draft. Oh, they have Kai Jones. Kai Jones, that counts as a young guy.
Presti,
Cam Christie, EJ Harkless, Ray J. Dennis.
Josh
Yeah,
Primo.
like, they just haven't nailed any of these late picks, which is understandable. It's hard to do that, but like, there's nothing coming up. Like, they only exist in a world where they can get vets to sign on cheaper deals, like a Nick Batum coming home or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, as bad as it might feel right now, there's a chance it could be even worse for them next year.
Half their roster is sneakily compiled with tanking players.
Yeah, players best known for their work on tanking teams.
Like Mo Bamba, Kevin Porter Jr., Bones Highland, Kai Jones, Josh Primo. Like that, those are all, I would categorize them as tanking players. Like all of them. They're like guys that haven't quite gotten their footing in the league, that need development, that need to figure out, how to do everything. You just give the keys to the car to KPJ and just let them run it into the ground. Like that is like what has happened. And it's weird to me that they compiled those players this offseason too. It's just weird to me that they would want to have all of those guys around. Now they have, like, if Kawhi and James are healthy, they've got guys like Nick Batum and Norman Powell and Terrence Mann. I think Chris Dunn is a winning player. I think Derek Jones Jr. is, obviously. I think Zubats is a winning player. Like, they've got guys, but if you remove Kawhi from that, and then you give James Harden a team that's not very good, that has some guys on here that are a little questionable. We've seen what James does in these kind of situations. Like,
he goes to another level.
He
goes not a good level, but it's another level.
It is a different level. There's no question. Yeah, and who knows? Like, they could piece together a decent year and the Thunder get like the 13th pick or something. Like that.
But here's where I got to turn off my hater brain. This is where we're rooting for Houston. We're rooting for San Antonio. Okay. Yeah. We want San Antonio to make their jump this year. Okay. We need more teams with the potential to pass the Clippers. Okay. So we're rooting for those teams. All right. Mm-hmm. We want them to be over 500. We want this Clippers to be struggling to get to 500 so that I do think it's a realistic scenario where you have Utah and Portland at the bottom. And then, like, it's a legitimate question whether it's the Clippers or the Spurs as that next team. And if that happens, like, yeah, you're going to go into that draft with, or at least the lottery with, like, 8th or 9th best odds, because there's going to be a ton of bad East teams. But like 8th or 9th best odds would be an incredible result of this.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like there are guys, and I've mentioned him before, Liam McNeely from UConn. He's like this 6'8", like pretty big player that can really, really, really shoot it. Like, you got somebody like that. I mean, it'd be incredible. And he can handle a little bit. He can pass a little bit. I mean, it's to just have the potential to add somebody like that to your already amazing roster, and for them to be on like a 4-year cheaper contract that's how you keep a team like this going. You're not going to be able to keep everybody as you start to have to pay guys, but you have the chance to like keep like a very good team together, for a long time. So yeah, it's just amazing.
Last thing I just wanted to mention was ESPN came out with their future rankings, which I I can't remember what year it was. I was super mad about them because they put Utah over OKC, but I don't even remember the context of why I was so mad about Utah being over OKC at that
That's like in
time.
the tanking years.
It might have been in the tanking years, yeah. But now, no complaints because OKC was number 1 in
Number
the future
one.
rankings.
Yeah.
The top 10, Boston,
Yeah.
New York, Philly. Now, this is just for the next 3 seasons, to be clear.
Mm-hmm.
Dallas, Denver, Houston, Minnesota, Golden State, and the Spurs. A little high on Houston, I would say, but that's fine. Like they have them ranked 17th for players, which I feel like is an important category
Yeah.
for the future.
Yeah.
They themselves rank their players 17th out of 30. So
Yeah.
whatever. So yeah, I might have them a little lower. But yeah, very cool to see
Yeah.
the Thunder at the top. And so they rank players, which they have them number 2, management number 1, money number 3, and draft number 3. Market 27, which I say that's a win. That means a couple teams are below OKC.
I'll take every single one of those numbers.
Let me scroll down. Okay, so Minnesota. Wow, they put Minnesota below it. Oh, that kind of makes sense if they're factoring in like the owner issue. Okay, so they're 29th.
If that has something to do with it, yes. But they have other like major league sports there in Minnesota.
30th was Memphis. Makes sense. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure Memphis is a smaller media market.
So yeah, technically a smaller media market than OKC.
And then who else? I mean, I could probably think of it off the top of my head. Oh, it's probably New Orleans. Let me scroll down.
It's probably New Orleans.
It's got it.
What is their rank? That's a rank.
New Orleans is ranked 16th. They're actually 25th market. Any guesses?
As to who's
it's Detroit. Detroit is 30th.
That makes no sense to me.
Huh. I mean, like I get it, but
they stink. We get that.
I feel like they're factoring in the stink of the management.
I know that's what it seems
market.
Like with it. I don't know,
because they also rank the management, which is also bad, 27th. But I feel like Detroit's a pretty good basketball market.
A very good basketball market, and they have professional baseball, and they have, they have NFL. I mean, they've got everything.
NHL, they got everything. They're ranked 29th overall, which, man, I mean, not a surprise, but 5 years into a rebuild, and you're 29th in a future ranking.
So sad. It's so bad, Al. It's so bad. You lose James Edwards too. Like it just keeps getting worse. Honestly,
it's a snowball effect.
It is. It just was inevitable. That's crazy. It is insane. I did want to bring up one more thing. A quote from Sam, which got funnier as it went on. And I just wonder, like, where does it stop? But he said, if Isaiah Hartenstein were 6'8" or 6'7", we'd still want him to be on this team. And then later, which really just means like we love his skill. His skill set is like what we want in a player. But then later he even said, if he was 6'5", we'd take him. So I'm just like wondering, like, if you kept talking, like, how short would Isaiah Hartenstein have to be before you would be like, actually, I don't know that we want him. Like 6'3", 6'2", and the guy was 5'8", we'd still want him. The guy was 4'6", we'd still want him. We love the skills.
That would be a fun game to play. Like, at what height would LeBron? Would you not want LeBron?
Ooh.
Like drafting him in 2004.
Yeah,
exact same skill set, but he is 5'8".
He is. I just wondered after because he said 6'7", 6'8", and you're like, okay, yeah, I could get that because like Jay Will is like 6'8",
Yeah.
There's like centers that are like 6'8", it's fine. Then when he said 6'5", I was like, that's interesting that he would say 6'5". I was like, how short? Like, follow up to the Hartenstein question: how short would he have to be before you wouldn't want him on the roster?
Was Sam like secretly doesn't like really tall guys? He actually would prefer that he's 6'5". Like, I wish he was 6'5". I would have tried to get this guy sooner
Yeah,
if
I
he was
wish he was
shorter.
6'5". We would have drafted him had he been 6'5", but we've waited because he's too big. Also, it helps that he's big. That's a good thing that he's giant.
Yes, we're all very happy about that.
Yeah, we're very, very happy about that. Okay. Anything else from today that stuck out to you before we go?
No. Excited for media day next Monday?
Yeah, Monday, I will be there with our good friend Dane Carr, who's going to do video for us again this year, and I've got some things planned. I've got players in line to do some down to dunk things for me on video, and we'll have that ready. I'm going to try to work on it some on Monday. It's an exhausting day of like interviews and like, I mean, it's a day, but I'm going to try to get at least a couple things ready Monday night. And then I'll be releasing a ton of content from, that day until the first of the season. Because
Are you going to ask Alex Caruso what it felt like when Samaj Kristen was picked over him? Did that motivate him to become the player he is?
Are you here today because of the Samaj thing? I do look forward to like talking to some of these guys for the first time, because like you hear so many good things about Caruso and Hartenstein specifically, from like other media members, and I've even talked to other players about Caruso specifically, and like people just love him. Yeah. So I'm excited to get to sit down with him and to be able to talk with some of these guys. So be sure that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel if you want to get all of that content. It'll be YouTube. Most of it will be YouTube exclusive content. So be sure that you are subscribed. Also, Down to Dunk Night 2K24. It's on Friday, November 8th against the Houston Rockets. I will put the link for the tickets in the YouTube comments and in the chat. So be sure that you get your tickets now, because if you don't get your tickets here pretty quick, you're not going to be able to join us on the court after the game. And the prize pack includes a signed basketball from Thunder players, and I had a and I don't know if this person wants me to say their name, but I've had somebody offer to give tickets that are like center court, like second row, for the winner of that prize. So you're going to get like the mega prize pack. So you want to be, it could be anybody that makes the half court shot. So be sure that you get your Down to Dunk Night tickets. It's going to be great. It's going to be against Houston. Like you just are going to want to be there. Hope everybody's doing great, and we'll talk to you guys again on Friday.